Welcome to Lawyers Who Learn, where we explore how attorneys' engagement and lifelong learning fuels their growth. Join us to uncover these journeys and gain insights for your legal career.
Electra, welcome to Lawyers Who Learn. Really excited to get to know your story a little bit better and to talk shop.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I've watched a couple of podcasts that you've done before, and I'm going to try to give an overview of what I found from your bio, and it's really an interesting background, and we'll dive into. But I also want to try to cover things that I haven't actually heard you say before, because for me, this is an area of discovery and hopefully things that you haven't talked about. But to start off, after law school, you did many really looks like interesting in-house legal jobs at the European Space Agency, at Disney, British American Tobacco. And one thing that you said, and we can talk on if needed, you felt like every 18 months you ended up leaving because it wasn't fitting what you looked for. And of course, we can dive into that. After that, you had started something called a law boutique, which we can get into a little bit more details. And then that went to the One NDA. I wrote One DNA, not the same thing. One NDA.
Yeah.
And then most recently in September 2024, I guess it was. Yeah. You and Law Insider merged, or you were acquired by them. And now you guys are doing some great things together. Anything I'm missing there?
No,
Cool.
well done. That's really good.
All right. So let me start with this before we get into the normal interview. Is there anything in the podcast interviews you've done before, and you do a lot of speaking, I see, that you wished you were asked about, or you wish you had a chance to talk about when it comes to learning and growth from a lawyer to now a legal tech entrepreneur, that you would love to talk about first before we start going into your background?
No, I don't think I've ever thought that. I've had a lot of conversations with different people in different scenarios and stuff. So I think I've covered quite a lot, but I do talk a lot about One NDA and standardization in contracts and kind of innovation. It'd be nice to talk a bit more about the nuance behind that and maybe the psychology of lawyers and how that's relevant to some of the ways that we work.
All right, let's dive right into that. What do you mean?
God, I think that lawyers get a bad reputation for innovation. We're always told that we're quite slow to change, that it's hard to drive change, that we're not the biggest change makers, particularly in an in-house environment. When it comes to driving change internally or asking for stuff or asking for budget, we're not great at that. And I think I've seen a massive shift within that realm over the last few years, and lawyers are really looking to innovate and to work smarter and better and get more out of their roles too and feel more satisfied in their jobs. But it's interesting to think about why that is and why we don't necessarily feel that we have a seat at the table when it comes to asking for stuff that we want within an organization. So yeah, a lot of it is to do with how we're trained, I think.
I don't know if I buy that because we're people first, right? But here's the interesting thing where I agree with you. And I would want to ask what your thoughts are, because since the past few years with AI, that's where I have seen a real shift where law is usually 5-10 years behind everything else. It seems like law is actually, for the first time that I've seen, ahead of other industries. And what I understand is there's 3 reasons that I am assuming that, right? One, law and AI were like meant to be, right? Discovering all the cases and reviewing that, looking through contracts and understanding the redlining and going through contracts and getting the details there, and also having to optimize everything to do with the billable hour and saving more time. There's so many things that AI saves and is built for to help lawyers go through all the data that they need. And I was wondering if you see that as one of the reasons why. Do you agree that the law is actually leading right now in innovation? And agree or disagree with some of the things that I said?
I don't know if we're leading in innovation. We're definitely up there as one of the professions that are very much able to leverage AI and the way that it's now evolved, because our craft is language, and that's what large language models are really good at, is deciphering that language. Now, whether or not I agree that taking a large language model and applying that to the way that we've practiced all this time is a good or bad idea, or whether getting AI agents to negotiate on our behalf is a good or bad idea, I don't know yet. I think there's things that are going to come. And I was in Miami recently, and I heard a conference that we hosted, and there was a talk by a professor, and he was talking about how the future of AI in contract could look like someone goes into, say, ChatGPT, they generate a contract, they then use AI to negotiate the contract, the humans out of this as well, this point. And then if there's a dispute within that contract, then the judge uses AI to decipher the nuance or the ambiguity in the contract. So we've now delegated the whole contract process to AI end to end. And so my question was, does this mean the end of the road for contracts as they are? Because the whole point of them is a meeting of the minds, and for us to know that we're entering into a negotiation or we're entering into a contract that's the basis of a relationship. And these are the parameters around that. So if we no longer have visibility of that, or if we're delegating a massive portion of it to AI, is that really where we want to be going? Or should we be rethinking the whole way that we contract to create more of a meeting of the minds? Having said all of that, I do think that law is absolutely prime for AI as a use case. And that's definitely why we are in the leading professions that are using it.
In the hope and the intention is, at a minimum, it'll bring the cost down of contracts, of creating a contract, and fast forward a lot of the back and forth that potentially would happen before. And I think that's one of the challenges right now is there's a question about access to justice. There's a question about how do you take something, and then we're going to get into what you've done. And I want to go back to your learning journey a little bit, but how do you use AI to not just make things more efficient, but to make things cheaper or easier to work with law? And part of that is, what do you need an attorney for and what don't you need an attorney for? And I think, isn't that part of what the One NDA approach is? Maybe it's a good opportunity just to share sort of what One NDA is. And then I want to just go back to maybe just talk a little bit about your learning journey to how you got there.
Yeah, One NDA is an initiative that I started back in 2021. It was an initiative to standardize the non-disclosure agreement form. It came about as an idea after I was in my second year of running TLB, which was a legal consultancy. And part of our offering was outsourced legal support. So we helped in-house lawyers with their contract overflow. And our business grew exponentially during this time because there were hiring freezes, but there were still loads of contracts to review. And at the end of the year, we did a deep dive.
But you're saying at the law boutique, you were, just so I understand what you were doing, contract review?
Yes.
So you started it after those roles in-house. The law boutique was an outsourced contract review firm?
We were a legal ops consultancy, but one of our arms was outsourced contract management.
Okay, so let's just,
yeah.
was that the meat of what you came from?
It was a 50-50 split.
And okay. And so just let's talk about that for a minute, because tell us, because those are really big, large in-house organizations, which it seems like it's really hard to get those jobs. Can you just take us through your experiences there? And because it's a big leap to work in-house and to start the law boutique. And I want to understand how you did that. And then we'll keep going to One NDA, but I just want to make sure we dissect each segment.
Sure. So I was in-house for sort of 10 years, but I was never purely legal. I was always quasi-legal. I was managing contracts and managing large negotiations.
Where did you go to law school, just to get a sense of?
In England, I went to the University of Derby and then Exeter University.
Okay. And then your first role was at one of these organizations after school?
I did my degree, my law degree, my LLB. And then from there, I went back to Cyprus and did my bar.
Okay.
And then I don't want to live in Cyprus. It's too small. I want to venture out into the world. Then I went to Exeter. I did a master's there. And while I was doing my master's, I applied for a role at the European Space Agency. So that was my first proper role. And
why the space agency? Was there a personal connection, or just happened to be the role that you saw available?
It was an opportunity that arose, and I was like, yes, I want this. So I thought there is no cooler job for me to start my career with. So I applied and I got it. And I went to the Netherlands, and that's where I got an insight into how contracts were done because I was in the contracts department. And they all worked off standard forms. Like the whole of the European space industry contracts on standard forms. So I thought, this is how contracts are done. This is sensible. And then when I left there, I went to other organizations like BAT, Disney, EY, and I saw that there was just complete fragmentation when it came to contracts. And I found it really frustrating because I thought, why don't they all just agree on one standard form? And then you look at other industries like financial services, you've got the ISDA or FIDIC or in construction, and it works. Standardization works. But it's just that there's been an industry push to make it work because it makes sense. But just on the horizontal kind of more commercial routine agreements, there is no industry push. So I started TLB. Other than that, I started TLB because I was frustrated being a conduit between legal and business and seeing the frustrations that exist on both sides. And I thought there needs to be a more sensible way to practice law in-house to get the most out of your role, and also for the business to get the most out of you. And a lot of the friction that I saw that I wanted to solve with TLB was in the way that lawyers operated, the way they automated, the way they worked or didn't, the way their contracts looked. Like, just, you don't need 300-page contract for literally anything, I don't think. So it was helping lawyers find ways to be more effective, not just more efficient, but more effective in their roles by working more sensibly. And part of that was also, don't do all your routine contracts by yourselves, outsource them, because they're not value add.
That's so interesting. So it was about a 6-year period where you're working at those 3 organizations, or was it longer? Disney, British American Tobacco, and European Space Agency.
So it was 10 years. That was
10 years. That was 10 years.
Yeah.
And just so I can understand, because obviously at each one of those, you could have built a career and been there today if you chose a different path. What was it, the same common theme at each organization of why you left, or what was the things what did you learn that you realized you wanted to move on to the next career? Because when I think about this, who's going to be listening to this, many attorneys are like trying to think about transition, or they're not sure if it's the right fit for them, and they don't know how to make that decision. I'm curious what you use to help you figure that out then.
I don't think I ever believed in a career. I don't think that I believed in the notion of climbing a ladder within an organization. I genuinely don't. I just don't ever think that I had that in my mind as something that I was going to do. Maybe it's because I'm Cypriot, and in Cyprus, the Cyprus dream is to have your own business one day, because it's very hard to build a proper career, or it was at least when I was growing up in Cyprus, because it's just, all there is just small and medium-sized organizations here. So there isn't much of a ladder to climb, if that makes sense. So everyone's aspiration is to start a business, and maybe that was inbuilt into my DNA that one day I would do that. And so I saw all these positions as opportunities for me to gain experience so that I can one day start my own thing, which I did. And it's not as fun as I thought it was going to be. It's much, much harder.
That's fascinating. So, if you're looking back, you can see that, but do you think going into that first job at European Space Agency at that time, do you think you're like, okay, I'm building experience for the one day at some point when I'm starting my own business? You knew that then, or potentially looking back, maybe?
Probably, yeah. I think I always wanted to do my own thing, but I don't think I was as deliberate about it. I was young. I was like, this is an amazing opportunity. I'm going to go and experience this, and I'm just going to live in the moment a bit.
And just, because when I saw when you said about you kept leaving career each one, was there something specific, what you learned or why you ended up going to Disney, or when you left European Space Agency, was there a specific thing that pushed you to leave?
So with the European Space Agency, that was actually a graduate program that I got onto, and then they extended the program for me for a year. So I was in the Netherlands for a year, and then they said to me, do you want to extend this for another year and go to Germany and train up the people there on the stuff that we've done here, because we were changing the rules of procurement. And I said, yes, absolutely. So I went to Germany. And then at the end of that year, they said to me, the graduate program, the objective of it is to train you up so that you can go into industry. So now that's up, you need to go into industry. So I did.
Got it.
I did that for 4 years. And then I was like, right, now I need a change.
And then that was Disney was your next role?
It was BAT.
Okay, BAT.
Yeah. And I went in as a contractor there.
Oh.
It was great. It was worked with a really high caliber team on an IT transformation project, learned loads about project management, learned a lot about operationalizing really large scale contracts, very much enjoyed my time there. So I was there for about 2 years, and then I went to Disney for a year, and then I went back to BAT because they were starting another project.
Interesting. Okay.
I want to go back to BAT because I had an amazing time there and I learned so much and I loved the team. So when that opportunity arose, I just took it.
Anything interesting at Disney, or it was nothing of value?
No.
No. Is there something to that? Was it too corporate? Was it
very corporate? It didn't feel like the tight knit team that I had at BAT. So I missed that.
Got it. Okay. You're at BAT. So what happened to the aha moment, or what ended up making you leave to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So then when I was at BAT for nearly another 2 years, that project ended. And I thought I can either try and find another project within BAT and do that, or I actually got engaged and I thought I'm going to get married soon and have children soon, probably. So if I'm going to do this business, I'm going to have to do it now. So I did it. And so when the end of the project came, I thought, let me just give this a go. So I just went on Facebook, actually, and I went onto a female entrepreneurs group. And I said, does anyone want any help operationalizing their contracts? Does anyone want help with me simplifying their contracts? So I thought, let me get some experience first with this kind of lower risk audience. And it started like that. I started working with smaller startups just to gain experience, but I really liked working with startups when I was at BAT. And then I started working with scale-ups from there. And I saw that they were bringing me in to help them with their contracts and help them be more efficient. And then I saw that they didn't really know much about how to leverage stuff like, I don't know, Trello to do a legal front door. So I was helping them with that. And then I thought there's a business in this, and this business is a legal optimization business. Because when you start out, I didn't have a clear idea of what I was going to do. I just thought, let me try this out because I want to start a business. And then I navigated through it, and then it got to scale ups. And then we stayed in the scale up space, like tech startups, funded tech startups for a while. And then we did One NDA. And then we got recognition by the large enterprise organizations. And then we were working with banks and with large scale, like the UN, big companies and big organizations. And then 7 years later, I decided that the time came to focus on One NDA and put TLB to bed.
I don't know if you see me smiling ear to ear. I love this story. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. Just to give you some background for me, in 2006, before I started Lawline, I had an entrepreneurship TV show on public access. And it was before really podcasts were a thing. And this is in New York. And public access is a cable station in Manhattan that part of their agreement was anybody who lives in that district was actually able to go to the cable station and actually film their own show for free. And I did it. And I was interviewing entrepreneurs because I wanted to start my own business if I wasn't sure how. And it was during these interviews that led to the entire path that I'm on today, where I ended up interviewing a web development company that I ended up hiring to build the Lawline website. It's where I interviewed people from an entrepreneurs organization. And I don't know if you ever heard of that before. It's an international organization of entrepreneurs. And they said, why don't you come interview people in this chapter? It's great guests. And at that moment, I said, someday, if I ever become an entrepreneur, this is the organization I want to be part of. And then I think it was something like 10 years later, I was actually president of the entrepreneur, that specific chapter that I interviewed. And it was from all those connections. And similar to you, I was in law school and it was my second year and I didn't know what I was going to do and I wasn't sure. And my dad had started Lawline in 1999. It's online continuing legal education business. But 2 years later, they actually dissolved the company because of the internet bubble crashed. But I always saw opportunity for that. And when I was interviewing entrepreneurs, I just said, what if in addition to interviewing entrepreneurs, I create a second area where I interview attorneys and I turn those interviews into courses, and I get those courses certified by the states and I sell them as continuing legal education courses. And then I realized I can say, this was 2005, 2006, because he started Lawline in 1999. I said, what if I say we've been around for 5 or 6 years instead of just like we're a startup? And when I graduated law school, that's what I started doing. I had one intern and me. And I don't know. So like when I hear like that path and that journey, I obviously every entrepreneur jump or leap of faith is interesting. So what was the moment, just so I can understand, because it seems like you were moonlighting a little bit while you're still working at BAT. What was the moment when you realized, okay, I can actually quit and do this full time?
Yeah, very cool story, by the way.
Thank you.
So I did it for like kind of 6 months, maybe less. And then I thought, I need to focus on this because this is too much. I can't be doing a full-time job and then trying to figure this out as well. So I'm going to quit. I had some savings and I didn't have enough revenue to quit. I just quit. And I thought, I'm going to live on my savings for a bit and then see what. So when you're young, you've got no real responsibilities. You can do that, right? Yep. Not to say that you can't do that if you do have responsibilities, but it's just much easier to do it when you don't have an enormous mortgage. So I did that, and then I ran out of money. So I took a contract for 6 months, and I was again moonlighting. And then 6 months later, GDPR became a thing, and I happened to be also a data protection lawyer. So I decided to focus on GDPR for a bit to get the money coming through, knowing that's not really what I wanted to do. But then I found that with data protection, you had a lot of operational areas that you needed to take care of. So if you wanted to set someone up to be GDPR compliant, it wasn't just a legal job, it was also an operational job. So then we got really good at this thing, and we had loads of massive GDPR projects where we helped people comply, not just by entering their policies, but also by setting them up from a tech perspective or from a process perspective so that they could continue to comply. And I really enjoyed that work a lot more than I thought I would. And I built a little team around that within TLB. So yeah, and then after that, it just became less of GDPR compliance, more contract review, more legal ops, more legal tech. COVID happened. So yeah, it was very fluctuating.
Did you brand it the Law Boutique right away? Or is that something that took a couple of years to come up with that name?
Straight away. And then the day after I quit my job on the 27th of September. And on the 2nd of October, I rented out a co-working space. So I thought, I need discipline. I can't just work from home. I need discipline. So I need to go to this co-working center. And I got a letter from an Australian company saying that if you don't give up this name, we're going to sue you because we've already started this company with this name. And I figured out that I'd registered the domain a month before them. So I was like, sue me.
Wow.
So that didn't happen.
Away?
Stressful. It went away, but it was like stressful from day one.
100%. Was there any during that period, or even now, because I think this is something that we all lean on, any books that helped you in your entrepreneurship journey, in your mindset journey, in your legal journey? What would love to hear, because I always love recommendations for others.
Yes. So the first book that I read was The Lean Startup.
Okay.
Which some may think that's not applicable to law. It's totally applicable to any business that you want to start, I think. It also teaches you a lot about mindset. Lawyers were like, oh, unless it's perfect, it's not going to leave the door. Whereas they're like, just get it out and iterate as you go and get feedback. And so that really shaped me in terms of how I approach the business, I think. I read a load of books at the beginning that I don't quite remember, but then as time went by, I read The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which I also found amazing. Bit harsh, but I was like, yes, this makes a lot of sense.
What's the big takeaway of that?
It's just, I think that just looking
Why
at
is it
how
harsh?
it's hire someone and then tell them that they need to come to a meeting and ask you questions every day for a month. And if they don't, fire them. I'm like, shit, that's, sorry, that's pretty intense.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What about recently? And I know what happens. You get into the path, and I've been doing this now 17, 18 years. And I actually had to just there was a time I wrote a book in 2019 called The Fast Forward Mindset, and it was taking essentially the 25 best books that I've ever read, my experience working with coaches, and putting it into like how to get out of your comfort zone, how to do things faster. And then after I wrote that book, I was just like, I can't read anything else right now. And then it was recently, I just restarted the engine and I started looking at books again. I was curious if you've been able to do that too, or because you're so busy, right? And you're like, you don't have time to do that. If there's anything you've had to be able to cling on to in the past 6 months, any books that are speaking to you?
Not that are of note, to be honest. And also, I don't have loads of time to read because I've got 2 small children.
Yeah.
And so when I want to consume information, I just try and find a way to consume it as quickly as possible. So lately what I've started to do is find podcasts and speed read the transcript that kind of gives me an insight. And then if I like it, then I might listen to it. But yeah,
are you speed reading the transcripts, or are you putting into ChatGPT and say, summarize this for me?
I haven't done that because I think that when I do that, I don't actually get the gist. I'd rather just read it and get the gist of it rather than get it to summarize. I don't understand summaries.
It's fair because you miss the nuance. And that's some degree of what I've done with a lot of these, because I would love to watch it all. And then I've done that where I have it summarized and then I watch it. I'm like, oh, wow, this is a completely different look and feel but I still knew the background, but you just don't get the nuance of who the person is and what they went through. So hear that. How old are your kids?
1 and 2.
Oh my God, you weren't kidding. Okay. I have 3 kids, 16, 16, and 11. So they're pretty self-sufficient at this point. But twins. Yes. I to some degree, 1 and 2 is much harder than twins, because with twins, as hard as it was, we just put them on the same schedule. And we were militant about that. With 1 and 2, I don't know. Do you treat them like twins in a way? Like
no,
scheduling wise? Okay.
Yeah, scheduling wise, yes. But yeah, one loves books, the other one loves throwing stuff.
I thought I remember reading in one of the summaries, now that the cat's out of the bag, that I did from your transcripts. Did you say you wake up at 4:30, or at that time you're waking up at 4:30 to get started in the day? And is that still how you work?
It's 5 now. It's 5. Sleep's like a bit of an illusion these days.
Yeah. Well, kids. I appreciate you. I know you're in Cyprus now. I'm in New York, and it's much later there, and I see it's dark out. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this. So let's dive deep into now. You're at the Law Boutique. As you could see, I could dive deep into anything, but let's move a little bit faster to the One DNA. What was the aha moment? Explain to me what's happening there. I assume you were making enough revenue to support yourself and to grow. And then you're like, okay, let me do this.
Yeah. So the company was ticking along. It was working, and it was COVID. And I'd hired a head of legal to look after like the actual legal work and the team that was doing the legal work. And I had a co-founder who was managing the operational side of the business. And so my job was to grow TLB. And I decided to become head of marketing. Now, this is the thing that when it's your own business, you can place yourself in different roles, even though you're not an expert in that bit, but you have to upskill. So I decided I want to do something that is like a meaningful marketing campaign that's going to add value to people, not just talking about the brand. And what is it that we can do? And I sensed that there was, just because it was COVID times, I felt that there was a need for community and a need to do something together. And I also did the numbers, and I saw that 63% of the agreements reviewed were NDAs. And I thought, this is mental. Like, I started this business because I didn't want the inefficiency, and now I'm perpetuating the inefficiency. I'm not even making any money on this bit because NDAs are so low value, and we'd be reviewing them in 10 minutes. So we weren't making loads of money. But they were huge in volume. So I put this thought out on LinkedIn, and it went viral. And I had lawyers messaging me saying, I had this idea 10 years ago. Why hasn't anyone done it yet? If you do it, I'll support you. So that's how it started. It started from an idea, turned into a LinkedIn post. Then I got good signals from the market that this was something that they would want. And I thought this would be great, because if this takes off, it will really put us on the map. Plus, it'll be really fun to do. And I did it.
Okay. Just as a side note, have you ever seen a lawsuit over somebody violating it? Have you ever been involved or seen a lawsuit of someone violating an NDA?
Not personally.
Yeah.
And when we did One NDA, we had lots of law firms involved, and we asked one of them to do some research to figure out whether that was the case, whether that had happened over the last 2 years. And they found no cases at all within their law firm that there was one case where an NDA became the subject of the suit. It was an M&A, bigger suit, and a bigger M&A suit, and the NDA was like relevant, but it wasn't the major driver for the suit.
No, and the reason I bring that up is because over the years, I've signed many NDAs, and there's usually, depending on the situation, one position has more power over the other, where you're a small company, you're trying to raise money, you have them sign an NDA, but even if it's violated, will you know it? And even if it's violated and you know it, will you be able to sue them? Do you have the money? There's a whole thing. And really, the way I think of as NDA is like, it's just a handshake in writing that like you hold in your pocket, and you just feel more comfortable like giving your data over to. But to your point, like you need to have that handshake, and you shouldn't have to be going back and forth on it. So it sounds like you hired a law firm to help you create this one. Tell me the story there.
We didn't hire anyone. Everything was voluntary. So I put this thought out on LinkedIn. I got these positive signals, and I said, I'm going to actually gauge proper interest now. So I set up a website on Squarespace. It took me a weekend. And then I said, if you're interested in this, I pitched the whole idea on this website. Then I put a form in saying, if you want to sign up to be part of the One NDA club, sign up here. And that means that you're going to help push this forward. If I can get 100 lawyers to sign up in 2 weeks, then I'll spearhead it. And we hit that number 12 hours from launch of this website. And when I say hit that number, we had people from all types of organizations, but including Google, Coca-Cola, AstraZeneca. So the word got out that this was happening, and people from really prominent organizations were quite happy to back it. Because those organizations were involved, obviously the law firms became interested. And so we had many law firms that were part of the One NDA project that helped to create the document and think about the document and what needs to go into it. Some of the larger organizations that were part of One NDA asked their law firms to become involved. And then once that happened, law firms were approaching us, asking us to get involved on a volunteer basis.
Wow. What year is this?
2021.
Recently. Okay. I didn't realize. So 2021, in, like you said, the height of COVID, you're building this. And so what was it like to facilitate a volunteer process to make One NDA?
It was the highlight of my career, I would say. I loved it.
I love that line. Tell me.
It was amazing to see this energy and this movement from people that were so passionately against this whole NDA process. It was like this hidden thing that people did talk about it, but no one was actually doing anything about it. So it was people's opportunity to do something to fix this problem. And just to see all this energy go into a project that I'd conceived was incredible. And to see all these lawyers come together that would normally be adversarial with each other because that's the nature of their roles, to come together to think about a better way of working was amazing. And we had so much support, particularly from the in-house teams that really saw the value of this.
How did you do it? Like, how did you just out of curiosity, how do you project manage something like that? What tools did you use?
Yeah. So ChatGPT didn't exist, which was a nightmare. But looking back, because now we did one SaaS, so we've just delivered another standardized document for SaaS agreements. And one SaaS we did it with all the data that Law Insider has, plus ChatGPT. So it was a massive game changer. But when we did it with One NDA, we'd asked the World Commerce and Contracting to give us an NDA that they drafted. They'd used 2,000 NDAs, and they collated this really long 5-page NDA. So I took that NDA and we broke it down into functions, and functions are the things that the contract does rather than clauses. And the reason we did that is because we wanted to decouple the notion of drafting from the actual context of what the contract does. We wanted people to really critically assess whether the things that they may be used to seeing should actually be in one NDA or not. We then ended up with a list of functions. We did that by getting all the lawyers in. We had a steering committee of lawyers. So we picked a subset of those 100 lawyers that had signed up, and that went into the thousands a bit later as the process remained open. But we created a subset which we called a steering committee, and the steering committee got into a virtual room and we agreed which of those functions should be in or out of one NDA. And then from there, we took those functions to the drafting group. The drafting group was made up of law firms, and we asked them to individually go away and draft a clause for each of the bunch of functions that we decided were going to be in one NDA. They did that anonymously. So all the law firms went away and did it anonymously, and then they put their drafting to the rest of the steering committee, who were in-house lawyers, to vote on the best language, which was great because we created competition between the law firms, and the in-house lawyers loved having the ability to assess how the law firms would perform here. So they did that. We then chose the best language for each clause, and that became One NDA version 0. We then put that out for consultation to the broader community. There were 1,200 lawyers now. They reviewed it. We collated 28 pages of comments. We took those comments. We either incorporated them into One NDA or disregarded them because we didn't agree. When I say we, the steering committee. And then we created a graveyard document to explain why certain provisions were excluded and why. And then One NDA version 1 was finally issued. And today it's been adopted by 6,000 organizations. And we estimate it gets signed around 10 million times a year.
Wow. That was fun to listen to and exhausting at the same time.
It's tiring.
So let me understand, just this is a basic question. It was built open sourced. What's the revenue model here?
There wasn't one. It was a marketing initiative. Yeah. It's open source. It has to be. It's the only way to gain.
Of course. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something there. So it was open source. I want to use it for Lawline. How do I use it? Tell me.
You can go onto the Law Insider website where it now lives, and you can download it, have a look at it, and then tell us that you've adopted it. So you fill in a form that tells us that you're an adopter, and then your name goes into the adopters directory, and then you just keep using it for free.
To go back a step backwards, this is the first time I'm hearing, let's say I'm hearing of One NDA. How do I get it? How do I use it? Is it an online form? Is it a PDF? Tell me from that concept. If this is the first time someone's hearing this, like, I want to use it right now.
Yeah, cool. You go on to the Law Insider website. There is a standards hub. If you go to the standards hub, there are lots of standards. It's not just One NDA, because after One NDA, we also did an M&A version of One NDA. We did one DPA, and now we've done one SAS. So there are lots of contracts, standard contracts for you to look at. You can download any of the documents. And if you decide that you want to become an adopter, on the same page where you downloaded the document, you can fill in a form that tells us that you're an adopter. One NDA is a Word document. It's a Word document.
Got it. Awesome.
Yeah.
And so I've known Preston Clark for a decade now, actually somebody who was the COO of Lawline. After he left, he ended up working with Preston Clark at a different company. Preston always had Law Insider on the side. He worked at this company called Law Rooms. He helped them build it up and sell it. And over the years, and I'm taking some credit here, he can say if I'm right or wrong. Over the years, he did different roles in different businesses. And I always said to him, I'm like, this is the money, like Law Insider, spend your time and energy building that up versus making it a side project. And I think at one point when one role, he ended up leaving a role and he had to figure out what to do next, he decided to put all of his energy into Law Insider and it was free for a long time, as you probably are aware. And then he started building the pro version and it started really taking off. And there's no bigger fan than me of what's happening at Law Insider and Preston Clark. And then I was at Legal Geek. I don't know if we did talk at all, but I was at Legal Geek in London. Lawline has partnered with Legal Geek for their upcoming conference. We did it last year in Chicago on their upcoming conference. We're doing a whole continuing legal education track. And I knew this was their preeminent conference. So I wanted to see what it was about. And I really got a lot of energy. And I saw you at the booth for a second, now that I'm remembering, but Preston and I have talked so many times. We've never met in person. Like, he was in New York and it got canceled, and then this got canceled. And we're so close. And then we were finally like, this is the one time in London we're going to meet in person. It's going to be amazing. And of course, his flight got canceled.
Of course. Of course.
So I've still never met him in person, but obviously, I assume.
Well, I just met him in Miami for the first time. Like, we've been talking every day for 2.5 years. He acquired my business, and yet I've only just met him. So it's a funny world.
So let's take me through that. Tell me through the acquisition. What happened? Why? Where was the thinking? How did you guys meet? Because again, where I see this going, this is reminding me, by the way, I'm really enjoying this because this reminded me of my good old days in 2006 when I was interviewing entrepreneurs, but now it's in law. And legal tech is a huge community now. When I started in 2006, it wasn't. I was in Miami too was it May? For the Legal Tech Fund Summit. Maybe it was recently. It was a couple of months ago, actually. I don't know if you heard of the Legal Tech Fund Summit.
I've heard of it, yes. I've never been.
It's unbelievable, but the ecosystem and the amount of entrepreneurs, it's really inspiring. So that's who I see wanting to watch this and see what you did. So here you are, you're running the law boutique, and you have one NDA, but it's an amazing thing. But like you said, it's open source, so there's no revenue coming in. Where did the connection happen with Preston?
Yeah, so I actually wrote a blog about how CLMs fail a lot. And I published this blog, and Preston contacted me and he said, I'm building CLM. Can you talk to me about all this stuff that's failure?
I'm going to ask an embarrassing question. What does CLM stand for?
Sorry, contract lifecycle management.
Got it. Okay. I knew that. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, of course, I should have clarified. Yeah, so
I always learn there's no stupid questions.
So I did talk to him, and then he said, I'm building a company called Simple Docs. Would you like to be an advisor? I said, I'd love to be an advisor. So I became an advisor to Simple Docs, and we continued to talk.
What is Simple Docs?
Simple Docs is Preston's other company, which is a contract lifecycle management tool. And he's building it with a slightly separate team. But yeah, there's a lot of synergy between what Law Insider is doing and what Simple Docs is doing as well.
What's the simplest way to explain what contract lifecycle management is?
It's a really good question, because I was actually speaking to someone today and said, I don't entirely understand what CLM means, even though I implemented a lot of them. And the reason I say that is because each CLM has a different feature set. They don't all have the same feature set, yet they're all allowed to call themselves CLM. It's effectively a tool that allows in-house lawyers predominantly to automate their whole workflow. So that could mean from intake. So when someone in the business wants to ask legal for support, there's a legal front door that might allow them to do that, but not all CLMs have that. And then from there, you have your contract management piece, which is like the nuts and bolts of a CLM, where users might automate the creation of the contract. They may negotiate on the platform, but not always. They may be able to send out the contract for signature, and then it comes back and then it gets stored on the CLM. And then from there, you can extract metadata, you can do reporting, you can have dynamic alerts. It can really help manage your whole...
It's a little bit of everything depending on who you're talking to.
Indeed.
And I realize, but we'll get there and we can do it. We have 5 minutes before we have to end, because I got another call coming up, which is good because you have probably to deal with your kids, or unless they're probably in bed already, actually. So they're not. Okay. So you talk to him, you become the advisory board of Simple Docs, and then what?
And then we kept talking, and I came to the conclusion that TLB was not a sustainable business model anymore. The way that the business had evolved, I realized that it just was not sustainable. It was very much reliant on the small team that we had. It wasn't scalable. It was very difficult to scale. And I tried for 7 years to scale it, and I didn't succeed. So I was 9 months pregnant. My co-founder announced that she was pregnant. 3 people resigned in very short succession between each other. And I thought I can either try and hire to support this team while my co-founder and I are out, or I can take this as a sign that this is not a sustainable business model, because it can't be that one of us or two of us go away because we need to, and then the whole business is at risk. It was just too much of a risk. So I decided that this is just a sign that the business model is not sustainable, and I need to focus on the stuff that is, the stuff that I've created that is scalable and that I can actually create something bigger of. And One NDA was it. And it was the thing. And I've always said this, One NDA found product market fit from day one, even though it was a free tool, which makes it much easier. But it found, and you feel it, that you found, whereas with TLB, we always had to iterate. And after 7 years, we hadn't quite found it. And I thought we just never fully found product market fit. I also saw contract overflow not being a thing over the next 5 years. That's my view. I think AI is going to take over all of that. And we could either pivot into being a full tech company doing contract overflow. I didn't want to do that. And so I decided to focus on One NDA. And that meant driving more adoption, driving more awareness, and seeing where it can take me. In the meantime, I kept talking to Preston, and I said, we had a conversation about what it would mean if One NDA went to live in the Law Insider family, the exposure that it would get, but also the infrastructure to maybe create revenue streams that are directly due to One NDA. And so that's when the acquisition occurred.
Awesome. That really makes a lot of sense. And what is your role at Law Insider now?
So I'm Chief Legal Officer at Law Insider, and I'm responsible for driving more standardization. So we just did One SaaS, which is a cloud services agreement, again, free, really great, robust document, check it out. And I also support product. So I help with driving product ideas for how we can implement tools that will enable people to uphold those standards, even when the other side won't accept them, through AI playbooks and other incredible features that are coming.
It's very obvious to me. He's lucky to have you. Seriously, the sky's the limit. The only challenge is our time, and we have to make decisions with family, with other things, and we want where we want to be versus what's actually possible with what else is most important in life is sometimes challenging. And sometimes you find where the path that you think is going to be is not what it is. And now you're at good thing, bad thing, who knows, is where it is. And I think you're at a good home right now. And I think you're going to be really interesting what you guys do. And I'll be watching closely. You'll be probably traveling. Lovely. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you for saying that. It's lovely.
Yeah, no, for sure. Again, we just met really, but you get a sense and a vibe pretty quickly from somebody. And I'm sure Preston right away when he spoke to you, oh my God, this is amazing. Well, I'll actually, with the last minute, I always feel like I need to do this, even if you don't have one, because I'm putting somebody on the spot for the whole time. And I feel like I want to see if there's any in our conversations or anything that we've said that give you an opportunity to ask me a question, to put me on the spot. And you don't have to, but it just makes me feel better to see if it can be as vulnerable as you want or as high level. And if not, we can just end here, but I just want to make sure to give you the opportunity to put me on the hot seat if there's anything that came to your mind.
What's the most shocking conversation you've had with an entrepreneur?
Wow. That's a good question. So when you say shocking, I can share a more recent one where I was talking to an entrepreneur, and every time I would see him and he'd tell me how well his business is doing. And it's a good month. It's good. And I'm like, oh yeah, good. That's great. And I thought he just meant it was doing well. But then when we started talking and it was doing 100 million plus, and I had no freaking clue. And he's making so much profit and he's building it there. Because he said to me in the conversation, he's like, yeah, the part that's stressful is I have 3,000 people that I'm managing. I'm like, what do you mean 3,000 people? I don't know. Is that an analogy or something? Or are you just saying that it feels like, no, we're managing because I've been to his office. There's only 7 people there, but it's all over. And so I was just and I'm like, you seem so stress-free. And he's like, I am stressed beyond measure all the time. And you don't, and so it just reiterates what on the surface and that's why I love this podcast. If you go a couple levels deep with somebody, you can learn that their business is bigger, that they have the same fears that you have, and you do all these things. So I was definitely taken by surprise because I've known this person for a long time. And obviously I'm not going to share the business or whatever because it was confidential, but it was cool to see. And
that is cool.
Yeah. But I'm sure there's more like shocking on the crazy side, but that's in the 26 seconds I had to figure that out. That's what I got. Thanks for your time. We'll stay on for 1 second. I'll let you know when this will air. And thank you all for watching and hope you got some value.
Thank you.